Hi, everybody. It's Joe Chaffee here on this Monday night, the 4th of February, 2019. Sorry about that. As we have a Monday coming after the day after the Super Bowl, which was really probably one of the worst Super Bowls in terms of action, unless you really like a defensive struggle. And as Scott Briller pointed out to me, so you snow lovers, from the Super Bowl, you will get this glimmer of hope in that of the prior 5 Super Bowl wins of New England, 4 of them certainly directly resulted in an above normal snowfall winter for New York City. Just pointing that out. Okay, it could have absolutely nothing to do with the fact that it's a series of perfect coincidences. And also the fact that 2 of those Super Bowls were that they didn't win were with the Giants, and I'm thinking that those were also above normal snowfall years too. Okay, so not only do you have the 4 out of 5, but you've got the other 2, so that gives you 7. 4 out of 5, so 6 out of 7, and that doesn't count this one. So we'll see. All right, welcome to those of you watching from my weather app, which is Meteorologist Joe Chaffee, which you can find on either Google Play or on the App Store for iTunes, for iPhones and for iPads. And also welcome to those of you from my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Chaffee, from Angry Ben's Angry Weather's Facebook page, which is Angry Ben's Angry Weather. I don't know, I'm kind of in a funny mood tonight. And also from the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut Stormwatch page. So welcome to everybody, and last but certainly not least, from Jeff Banson's weather page, Meteorologist Jeff Banson. So a lot of the action is in the West, and also the fact that the weather here in the East is, well, it's just nice. It's really spring-like, and it was beautiful today, but getting some weird temperature action going on at the moment, which now that the Weather Service electronic digital display tool is up and running again, we're actually going to be able to take a look at some of the weird numbers that we're seeing. But very much lit up like a Christmas tree in the West. And actually, some of the warnings and advisories have come down from earlier today. We had winter storm warnings up all the way into southwestern Oregon. Those have come down to advisories, and in some cases have just been lifted altogether. In the meantime, you still have warnings up to much of Northern California. And by the way, the snow levels in some of those areas closer to the coast are forecast to drop to under 1,000 to about 1,000 feet. Now, that's pretty low. So there's going to be some snows visible probably not too far inland from San Francisco with all of this, and there's more action to come in the longer term. We've got winter storm warnings that continue in through the Sierra Nevadas, including 2 areas that are indicated for blizzard warnings. I did happen to take a look at some of the forecasts up here. I looked at Lake Tahoe, and they're basically going for about 2 to 3 feet of snow. So there are going to be mega amounts in that area. Warnings extended also into parts of Nevada, where we've got some advisories as you go further east, and they go back to warnings up as you go into the eastern part of the state. A scattering of winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories in Utah, up through Idaho. We've got advisories and avalanche warnings. We've got some winter storm warnings up for parts of Arizona, also some flood watches. Back to California, where we're also dealing with advisories and warnings in some of the mountains all the way down in the southern part of the state, and a few flood watches as well. In the east, we have actually what's left of what was an extensive ice storm warning across much of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. We've got some scattered winter weather advisories up back through Minnesota, also in southern Wisconsin through northern Illinois, and in through southern Iowa, northern Missouri. And the light blue is all for wind chill again, because there's another cold high building down. And the issues in the east with regards to some flood watches up in southwestern New York State, probably because of the snow that they had with the lake effect. And now, of course, dealing with the snow melt, plus some rain. Advisories up in northern Maine. Dense fog advisories through the central Gulf states. So anytime you see fog, it's a surefire sign that you've got warming going on somewhere. And the warm up here in the east was such, at least in my neck of the woods this morning on Long Island, we had a lot of black ice this morning and even some freezing fog that developed. And I'm thinking that we could see some fog tonight, and again, maybe some freezing fog for areas in central and eastern Suffolk County on Long Island. Would not at all be a shock. Looked like there's a small area of dense fog advisories in southeastern PA and on up into parts of Maryland and Delaware. So again, all of this is a result of that warmer air that is coming up the eastern seaboard. So we're going to take a look at some of the temperatures, because we had, this time of year, the general rule is that whatever you think that, however high you think the temperatures are going to go, it's probably going to wind up going higher. We're at this is the time of year, the sun is beginning to slowly gain some strength, but when you get a day like we had in my area from eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, which was a rare cloud-free day, thanks to a storm off the North Carolina coast that's been kind of inching its way eastward, but we basically had a lot of subsidence here, a lot of sinking air from the outflow from this low, which looked pretty impressive on the satellite loop. So as a result, all the dry air, the air sinking, had deep blue sky and sunshine all day today. So temperatures wound up warming up 5 to as much as 10 degrees higher than the models were forecasting. And we also had I guess this is really the first time that we're seeing the usual impact of the spring sea breeze that develops because of the cold ocean. So many areas, once they saw their temperatures kind of nudge up into the lower 50s along coastal areas, saw them taken immediately back down into the low 40s. And out to the west, of course, where that's not an issue, you see the 4 o'clock surface map with temperatures in the 50s and 60s up through the Ohio Valley and northeastward. Look at the numbers in Michigan, where they were in double digit below zero. Now, just a few days ago, seeing temperatures up around 50 with this cold front pushing through. And of course, on the other side of this weather front is another high that is coming down with some very cold air, but not the kind of cold air like we saw with the Arctic burst that came on through. So it makes a huge difference. There's no vortex this time around. This is a kind of a typical strong high that comes down with some Canadian cold air. And then in the west, we've got this winter storm that has moved inland now in southeastern Oregon, and there's colder air that is being bled southward and through western Washington, western Oregon, down in through much of California. You can see the trailing cold front here. This was a 1-2 punch, very impressive system. 2 of them that came in this weekend, one that came in on Saturday, and this other one that is dropped in during the day today. I got a pretty cool satellite loop, by the way, and this tool, I'm going to put the link here. Let me just jump back to the chat board really fast, and then I'm going to go back to it. But I think you'll really like this satellite tool, because it takes the GOES 16 and goes up. It's too long, so I can't put it up here. So if anybody wants it, I did share the link up on a Patreon post earlier today. But it's a Colorado State University product, and it's ramMB-slider.cira.colostate.edu. So I guess if you Google Colorado State Satellite Loop, this is an amazing tool, and all the credit in the world, guys. This is terrific. But you can see the upper low just so well defined here off on the satellite off the coast of California. Just an amazing shot here, and the clouds inland. Things in the west behave a bit differently than they do in the east. You can see the impact of mountain ranges and how the moisture gets sort of wrung out as it comes in to the east side of the mountains, and then you get this kind of this dry shadow, and then it fires up again later on as you move to the other side. But this is a really cool tool, and let me see if I can bring up the menu. But you can actually switch this, by the way, from the GOES 17. It does give you the option here from GOES 17, and we can go switch to the Eastern satellite full disc shot. And it really does stand out, the system off the Carolina coast. I'm trying to get a little closer here. I'm learning to figure out all the options, but this is on the full disc. I was able to get the continental U.S. shot. Here we go, full disc. So you go to continental U.S. and we can zoom in. And actually, what happened today? I mean, here's your low center that's way out offshore, and up on the northern fringe of this. From Delaware, Maryland, and through New Jersey, eastern Pennsylvania. This system actually, we were kind of half kidding around, both on and offline, about how it looked almost like a tropical system. It was just had a very well-defined signature on the satellite loop, but on the northern fringe of this, of course, you're getting subsidence, a lot of sinking air. So clouds just absolutely disappeared, hence the cloud-free day. And then, of course, out to the west, now you've got this weather front that's pushing eastward that has some showers with it, but it's not the most impressive front in the world. There are some showers back through eastern Ohio, moving into western Pennsylvania, and on up into western New York. Again, areas that were down in the single digits to near zero, and in some places below zero, now dealing with rain. So it's amazing that happens, but this is the second time we've seen it this winter so far. And these showers, I think most of this is going to either wind up going to the north, or they're just going to wind up drying up and falling apart. Meanwhile, out in the west, this has actually calmed down from earlier. There was a solid wall of rain earlier today up and down California. That has since relaxed a bit because we're kind of at the tail end of this particular storm that's impacting the west coast of the United States. And there's more issues with regards to storms in the west in the longer range pattern, but you also see some of the snows and that are going on in parts of Washington, eastern Oregon, and now moving into the Rockies. So definitely a busy map in the west. And here's the EDD is back up, so we can take a look at the impact this time of year. You can see it a lot. You've got the sea breeze going. You've got radiational cooling going on. Some places holding it onto it better than others. So the temperatures have actually cooled pretty rapidly from the highs today. We're already down in the upper 30s and even mid 30s and upper 20s on Long Island. So there's going to be some black ice and freezing fog issues tonight. And I got to be careful then, that means on my drive home. But again, look at these numbers. You got some middle and upper 40s, then middle and upper 30s, back to some 40s. So a lot of, from place to place, a lot of variation. If there's the slightest breeze, you're going to see the temperatures higher. If you've got the sea breeze going on, that's going to knock it down lower. The ocean water temperatures sitting right around the 40-degree mark. So very weird in a way. And then you have the issue with the warm air moving up into the Ohio Valley, where we've got numbers in the 50s and 60s. These are 7 p.m. Eastern time temperatures, where readings up into the 50s across much of Indiana and Ohio. And then you can see where the weather front is, and we start to drop into the 20s, teens, single digits, and then back to below zero, and even some double-digit below zero readings showing up in the Dakotas. And of course, out in the west, a lot depends on where the station is in terms of where you see what the temperatures are, but certainly where you've got the winter storm warnings, and in the mountains with the blizzard warning there, you're talking about temperatures that are running down in the mid-20s to near 30. But it's actually pretty chilly, even down in the coastal areas where you've got readings in the 40s down almost to LA, and San Diego right now at a chilly 57. And San Francisco is at 48, but just inland it's 38. And even you go further up the coast, you're seeing some readings in the upper 30s. So it's certainly cold enough air with this big upper low that's dropping down, and you're dealing with the snow and some heavier snows in the Sierra Nevadas. So here's the situation going forward in the short range. Of course, we've got this cold front coming through in the east, a little high that necks down from eastern Canada. It just basically takes temperatures back down closer to average for Wednesday, and it's not even that close to average. It'll still be a little bit above average. And we've got a ripple of low pressure running ahead of the main low, which is going to be coming out of Kansas and heading up toward the Great Lakes. So thinking that we'll probably get some rain in my area tomorrow evening. You notice on the northern fringe is a little bit of freezing rain and snow that goes on through upstate New York and into New England tomorrow night, and a more important snowfall perhaps setting up for parts of the plains, as you got this big high pressing down with some very cold air, and into the upper Midwest as the low winds up moving its way through Wisconsin. And then gradually that front reaches the East Coast on Friday with not a whole lot with it, but then we've got this high building down. And meanwhile, in the West, of course, this storm that goes to the lakes is this western storm now, and there's a bit of a break until the end of the week and going into the weekend when it looks like we have something of size attempting to come into California, but it doesn't really hold together all that well. Then that goes in, and then later next week on the models, you start to see a stronger system being indicated for later in the forecast period. But we're talking later next week into the long range. So let me just kind of touch on what's going on with the upper air, because we're getting, if we had been having already at least had a few chances of significant snow for the I-95 corridor anyway, I probably would be approaching this a bit differently than I'm approaching it now. I'm kind of in prove it to me mode, because we've had what few opportunities for snow that have occurred have fizzled for the immediate coastal areas, not for the inland areas, and also not for the mid-Atlantic states, which have seen a couple of events out of this. But you got to prove it to me. I'm approaching this with a lot of skepticism going forward. The ridge is in the east. You can see the flow across southern Canada is basically west-southwest, so we don't even have it close in terms of bringing cold air in this week. The deep trough that is out in the west that gets kicked eastward, and you'll see there's another upper low that drops southward but off the west coast. Ridge in the east at the end of the week, and then you get enough of a trough and enough of a Canadian push that you start to get into some colder air for the weekend. Beyond this is where it becomes the big question. You are going to maintain a bit of a polar connection there through central Canada down into the northeastern part of the United States and in the Great Lakes. The question is how much of that's going to hold on. And as we move into next week, there's a very weak shortwave that approaches Sunday night and Monday. It's generally a flat, almost ridge position here in the eastern part of the United States, at least according to the world that the GFS lives in. And it does want to try to drop that next trough a little, to further west, then swings it around later next week. And then it just kind of, I don't know, overall, it looks like it wants to go to a split flow pattern of some kind, but you still have that kind of omnipresent ridge, not either in the east or just to a little bit further to the west than that. I'm not 100% sure how this is all going to play out in the long range. I think that next week will probably open up a window of opportunity for something to happen, and whether it does or not remains to be seen. The parallel GFS, for what it's worth, has a bit more of a bullish scenario for snow going forward. Trough lifting up into eastern Canada. Get a cold front through here at the end of this week. The cold air comes in. Not the coldest air mass in the world, but it'll be cold enough to take temperatures below average. And then you have one short wave that swings around on Monday. And here's where it has a stronger short wave that gets ejected out of the west and moves eastward for Tuesday. This is kind of where the models differ a little bit, because the parallel probably has a bit more of a suppressed look to it. At least it did earlier today. And then that lifts out. And overall, it wants to have a colder look even into day 10 or 11. But it doesn't really hold it. You can see how the flow goes westerly here as we run into days 12 and 13 and 14. So it's kind of I guess the best way to describe it really is you've got this window that is opening up where you might have the pieces coming together for the chance for some snow. Now, whether they do or not remains to be seen, and I think it's only fair that I got to remain skeptical with this. So I'm going to just back up. Okay. So here's how it plays out on the surface map. Here's your cold high that builds in for the weekend. Now you've got one area of precip that runs out ahead. Looks like some warm advection, a weak short wave that moves through. The parallel GFS has that coming through Sunday night and Monday, really very weak and doesn't do much with it. It holds the energy back with a second low, where this is from earlier today, which took a primary into northern West Virginia, then starts to develop a secondary offshore. It's got cold air locked into the east, and this would be the snow event that all the snow lovers have been waiting for, however many inches it winds up producing. Again, skepticism is high. The West, by the way, at this point is enjoying its next round of big rains and snows with another storm coming in. The system on the parallel GFS actually intensifies into a pretty strong gale center, passing south of Nova Scotia and Newfoundland later next week. Again, my skepticism here is strong. Of course, and this is only natural, the snow lovers have continued to gravitate to the European, okay, which I find really funny, if only because of the fact that the European has been such a horror show this winter in so many respects in its long range, that suddenly it now gains credibility. Why? Because it shows the solution that it shows the solution that you want. Agenda driven, okay, but there's your European. The flow from Canada is there. You've got a split in the west. There's energy in the west, and some of that's going to get kicked eastward, and you can see it right there. It matches actually up pretty well to what the parallel GFS. And overall, the European has a colder look. But I got to tell you, one other possibility in all of this, and it's not impossible, is that you could wind up with something like the Canadian has, where the system from Friday pulls out and a fairly strong ridge builds up along the east coast. That would suggest that anything that comes out of the west, and you can see it here, see how the trough swings up into the northern Great Lakes? That would suggest that anything that comes out of the west winds up cutting toward the western Great Lakes, or at least the central Great Lakes. Don't rule it out, okay? That is certainly possible. That's what the Canadian did with taking a low pretty far to the west. The European, and I'll have to do it with this map, and we'll do it with the mean sea level pressure and normal anomaly. The European, again, much like the parallel GFS, that was the Canadian. Let me switch. Always forget to switch it back. But here's the European with the cold high on over the weekend. Another high builds in for Monday as that weak system goes by. You kind of have to have that weak system because it brings in that next shot of cold air. And there's your surface low on Tuesday in eastern Kentucky, which by Wednesday morning is sitting near Cape Cod. Now I can tell you, as I looked at the snow amounts, it gave an inch to 2 inches pretty much from Philadelphia down to Baltimore and Washington. It gave New York City 4. Long Island is in 3 to 6, northern New Jersey 3 to 6, and then higher amounts as you go through upstate New York and into New England, clearly. So But the Europeans got this colder solution that matches up. I got to tell you, folks, I would not. I really wouldn't stock a whole lot of faith right now, a week in advance, particularly given the kind of winter we've had. If we had been in a winter where we were getting chances for snow and having those chances materialize on a regular basis, I wouldn't have any problem probably being more bullish at this point. But you just can't be, given the kind of winter that it's been. You just really can't be bullish in a scenario like this. Oh, you know what? Let's go to Eastern Canada. By the way, I took the day off yesterday, but I did have my early Patreon live stream, which I did share with everybody around midday. So that was the Patreon folks were able to watch it live and participate in the chat. But I just didn't have time to do a second live stream for YouTube yesterday. But I put the Patreon up there and opened it up to everybody at noontime. So that was with the Super Bowl and all sorts of stuff going on. Okay, so let's look at Eastern Canada. All right. Precip for my buddies in Canada. So I'm going to let's use the parallel GFS, because that's at least, it's close to what the European has. This is the late afternoon run, which has a different scenario here. Here's your Thursday, Friday, so that's pretty consistent. Weak warm advection on Sunday night, and then it brings out the next low, and notice it goes further north on this run. It takes it to the eastern lakes. Don't bet against something cutting to the west. It is entirely possible that could happen. Okay. Can't do it with the parallel. I forgot, so I got to do the regular GFS. Okay. So let's take a look at Southeastern Canada, and let's roll back. The system for this week, we've got one for tomorrow that brings mostly rain to Nova Scotia and Newfoundland with a little bit of sleet and snow, and then that goes out. And then we have the one that's impacting my area for Wednesday into early Thursday, and that just disappears. You have the stronger system with the cold front coming through for Thursday night and Friday. Again, this is more another snow to rain, maybe ending as a little bit of snow on the backside. Excuse me. You got a fairly wrapped up low there, northeast of Labrador, that just kind of sits around and gets into the 950s. So it looks like the pressure gradient is going to tighten a bit there for southeastern Labrador and Newfoundland going into this weekend. That low just sits up there before it finally gets kicked away to the northeast. And here comes your system for the middle. It really doesn't show very much. First warm advection area goes out, and then around the 13th, 14th, you've got a deep low, that the one that I showed you that the model cut to the lakes on the late run, a 75 low in eastern Maine, and that runs well to the west of Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, and the big gales that develop behind it after the low moves out. So for everybody involved, obviously track is going to make a big difference. And you can check for yourself on tropicaltidbits.com. Go to the maps for next Monday and Tuesday, and then just flip back a series of runs. Just go back maybe 5 or 6 runs and look at how all the changes that the models have made. We had the appearance today it's one of the model runs overnight or during this morning, had the 1,000-mile warm front again, this time, and had it across the southern states. I love when it does that. The only time it shows 1,000-mile long warm fronts, usually it's way out in the long range, and in this case it was. But it's just hilarious to see a warm front across. I think the late afternoon run has a 1,000-mile warm front that goes from northeastern North Carolina west-northwestward into southern Minnesota. Just one. That's where the low is. Just this one gigantic warm front coming up the East Coast. Guess what? It never happens that way. Okay? It looks like there might be a few pieces in that puzzle that are missing a bit. So, look, the bottom line for the frustrated snow lovers among you, you've got a chance here, but all those short waves, everything that's going on, and how this thing gets ejected out from the west, how much of that northern jet gets in place there, everything's going to have to time out just right. Otherwise, you are going to wind up with another system that's going to be cutting up to the west. So, congratulations to the Patriots, winning their 6th Super Bowl in the last 17 years. That is really a phenomenal accomplishment, by the way. Whether you're a Patriot fan or not, that is a really phenomenal accomplishment in football. Especially at a time where you wind up, you see different teams every year kind of winning their division. The Patriots seem to be the ones that have maintained a more in the way of consistency, but with the parity, there seems to be surprises every year. So, I think it is quite a feat. Alfred up in Wainwright, Alaska. Did I just see that you were 13 above zero? Is it the 6th or the 7th? I don't know. All I know is, you know what? The Giants, there are 2 Super Bowl losses at the hands of the Giants, okay? And one with the Eagles. So something about the NFC East, I guess. I don't know. Jason Barry, if we are in a 1990s pattern, it should be an on-time spring. Good observation. That's correct. If that is the case, if we're in a 90s type pattern or an 80s type pattern, I think spring will come on time and not get extended. Now, there's a lot that can happen between now and then. And by the way, last year we had we were in a very, very warm last part of January and much of, if not all of the month of February, before we had the big stratospheric warming event on President's Day weekend, and then, of course, the big pattern flip and the incredibly stormy March that we had last year. And I'm discovering, by the way, that apparently so many people have forgotten about that, because just judging from the comments on my Facebook page, it's as if it never happened, because they're already talking about sun angle nonsense and all the rest of it, and I can't be bothered with that sort of conversation. But look, this might be a bit of a different scenario going forward. I don't necessarily think that this could be a situation where if the NAO does decide to appear, it's already shown that when it's been negative, it's not the right kind of NAO, and it could very well play as a negative. Okay, so just bear that in mind. It's not necessarily a given that the NAO is going to suddenly come, marching along and suddenly giving you sort of this last gasp scenario of cold and snow. I just don't see how that's going to happen, and if anything, it may wind up hurting your situation. Brandon Diaz, you want me to check the weather in Germany? I will do that for you. So hang on one second, and we'll go to Europe. Bring up the surface map and just roll it back, and I'll start it again. So let me just make it full screen for you. And where in Germany are you, if I may ask? But here's the map. So there's not a whole lot of snow going on, at least initially, and we are getting the flow coming in off the Atlantic, so storms are coming in on a regular basis, but the overall surface look here is not as cold as what it was. Looks like the cold air has retreated back pretty far into Siberia, because I'm seeing the 540 thickness going all the way up here. Getting some northerlies in England next weekend, but in the meantime, looks like more rain showers than anything else. Some rain and snow mixed there in parts of southern Germany, but it looks more like rain than anything else, because there's seems to be an absence of cold air. Let me just take a look at the upper air. Yeah, in fact, you know, rolling it back, there's you're getting a big ridge. So they're catching a bit of a break here. You've got a big ridge in Western Europe going all the way up from Spain on up into Norway and Sweden and into Germany. So you are seeing relatively warmer weather here. And then that ridge starts to shift eastward, and you begin to get systems coming in off the Atlantic. But it's pretty progressive looking because you're getting one trough moving in and then followed by another ridge. And the ridge builds actually fairly strongly here by days 8, 9, and 10, and then just suddenly gets taken apart, followed by another ridge. So it looks like a pretty progressive pattern west to east, which means it won't be able to get too cold for too long as these troughs go by. So looking more wet than anything else in terms of from what I'm seeing. That round of wintertime weather seems to have kind of maybe they're getting their thaw at the moment. Maybe it'll refire again, but at the moment getting fall-like conditions for some places in Central and Southern and Southeastern Europe. This has been a pretty tough run. Anthony Orr, the negative EPO, would help prevent lows from cutting to the west? Or if they did, would there be a second low redevelopment? Probably the latter, that there would be some redevelopment. And yeah, the negative EPO does help the situation because that is at least when that East Pacific oscillation is negative, and it's forecast to remain negative pretty much over the next 2 weeks. That does favor colder air coming into the eastern United States. You also have an off-the-wall negative Pacific North America index, which is interesting because that puts a ridge, that kind of implies a ridge in the east, trough in the west. So they're sort of working against each other. And next week is probably a window where the Pacific North America index starts to come off its deeply negative reading, allowing perhaps the EPO to have a bit more of an influence. And that I think is where the snow lovers' opportunity lies. But as I said, confidence factor always 7 days out is going to be low. But given the kind of winter that we've had, I would say that it is very, even lower than it usually is. Mark G, the Euro shows the solution you want, and it's not. I wouldn't call it a big snowstorm. I looked at the snowfall amount numbers; it wasn't that big. But the fact that it's got it on there on the 168 to 192 hour time frame, which is the time zone that the European has had a horrific time with, has been that period from about 144 to about 216. So it's showing you a storm right in the time frame where the European has performed its absolute worst. That does not give you any more confidence. So I think the best thing to do at this point is we're going to take a step back and we are going to just wait to see how things evolve over the next 5 days. I know that's something I do say a lot, but in the end, we really really just have to kind of sit and let the model settle in. I think we know how this is going to happen. The question, and the models will eventually, hopefully, come to the ideas that I've got in my head with regards to some kind of low moving across the Ohio Valley and then potentially redeveloping. But in terms of the fine details and what it would mean as far as specific forecasts, we're never going to get that out of here. JR Boy, number 398. You want me to take... Thanks for hitting Super Chat tonight. I really appreciate it. First one of the month. Thank you so much. You want me to check the weather across the South. Well, one of the things that will happen here in this overall pattern, if you watch the maps closely, we'll go back. Let's get the GFS here. Let's go... let me get back here to the shorter range. So with more of these lows kind of trying to track further north, you do have one weather front that's going to try to push colder air in. You get somewhat colder air coming for the end of this week, with the front that's moving to the east coast. So this high does spread that cold air down fairly far to the south, but it's not overly cold, okay? The 540 thickness line, which is where your rain snow line would probably be, doesn't really make it much further south than northern Tennessee. You might have low-level cold air that bleeds further south, but it's mostly dry. And then you've got this first week system for Monday. So you do have some showers across the south and back through Texas, but there's not a whole lot of cold air that's pinned down here. When the more important system comes out, it's mostly rain because that low is way to the north. Now, again, here's a situation where the late afternoon model run cut that low for the middle of next week and cuts it out to the lakes. If you look at the surface, there's an attempt for redevelopment here because you've got a low in southern Wisconsin. There's a wave that's already going out. That may or may not be real. That might be the model rushing it a bit. But there is a secondary here. But at the point that, like, when it's like this, it's too little too late. That low cuts so far left that you wind up having the high go out in a bad spot. It pretty much warms up and rains just about everywhere before it turns colder behind it. And of course, across the south, it's a matter of just a couple of cold fronts coming through because you don't have a deep trough here in the eastern part of the United States. You don't have a deep trough that's going to bring the brunt of the cold air down, say, into the southeastern states or into the deep south at least. You've got a ridge position here for much of the weekend. So look at this. I mean, you've got this ridge pulls out, weak short wave moves through, ridge rebuilds back, and then kind of hangs around as the next trough drops into the east, but it doesn't drop that far to the south. So if you're looking for snow down in the south, you're not going to get it with these particular runs. You had the one opportunity you had was when that whole vortex dropped down, and the extent of the trough did bring that cold air down fairly far to the south, but it didn't bring it all the way down the way it could have. And we have seen in air masses in years past. Okay, so I think that pretty well covers it tonight. Thanks everybody for being here. I really appreciate it. If you're new to my YouTube channel, welcome, and do subscribe, absolutely free. Become a subscriber to my YouTube channel so that this way you get notifications when we do live streams, which, by the way, is once a day on most days. And when the weather's really active here in the east, there's a big storm running around, we'll do it twice a day. If you have not done so, here is your opportunity to go to the Google Play Store and download my app for Android devices. And that app, my weather app, is absolutely free. You could actually watch the live stream from the app, as some of the folks that are on the app right now are watching this live stream from the app itself. So here is the one for the App Store for those of you who have iPhones and iPads. There is your link to download it. Otherwise, just go to your prospective store and just search Meteorologist Joe Chaffee and it will appear. Okay, and for those of you who want a even more intense weather coverage, I've got this weather platform on Patreon, okay? And the link for that is going up on the chat right now. We do posts during the day that I don't do on my website. It's just for Patreon members. As I said earlier, I did a live stream yesterday just for Patreon members, and you get notified what time the live stream is going to be so you don't miss it. And you can message me anytime, and I will respond to you in a timely fashion. That is my subscription live stream, my subscription weather platform, and it's just $2 a month to join. A lot of folks that are on here on this live stream are part of the Patreon family, we'll call it, and they seem to enjoy it, and I'm glad they are. We've been trying to do new things, putting, whenever I find some cool weather tools, I'll put the links up for everybody to share. And of course, when we get into a storm situation, we really get into it in terms of what we're looking for in a forecast situation and what we think is going to happen, and you even become part of the process the forecasting process. So think about that. Again, it's $2 a month, and the link is up there on the chat board. So we've got the Joe and Joe Weather Show tonight at roughly 9:25 Eastern Time on my Facebook page, meteorologist Joe Chaffee. And we are going to be back to normal tomorrow. So we'll just be doing our 7 o'clock live stream right here on YouTube, and another Joe and Joe show tomorrow night at 9:25. Incidentally, I'm just kind of lost my train of thought. There was one other thing. Oh, I might as well mention it now. So on March the 12th, which I believe is a Tuesday or a Wednesday. You know, I'm losing my, let's see, it's a Tuesday. Okay. So Tuesday, March 12th, I will be at the Westwood Library in Westwood, New Jersey at 7 o'clock. So will the Northern New Jersey Weather Observers, Weather Observers Group. They will be there as well. So come on out. That's the Westwood Library in Westwood, New Jersey, and I'll be talking more about that in the coming weeks. And I think that pretty much covers it. Okay, so everybody have a great night and safe travels. We'll see you tomorrow, and I hope you won in your Super Bowl pool, because I certainly didn't. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you later.